There comes a time when silence is a betrayal. Our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about the things that matter. He who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetuate it. He who accepts evil without protecting others against it is truly, heartfully cooperating with it. The words of Dr. Martin Luther King. There are some events that etch themselves in your memory so long and deeply that after they have passed, you remember where you were or what song was on the radio or who you were with when they took place. In the wake of their passing, somehow your cortex holds on to more than it normally does. In the past week, several people have asked me if I remember what it was like when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was alive and then when he died. I was 6 years old when Dr. King was killed. I'm not sure if I actually remember it or if the memories I have were created by my parents telling me stories, telling me what happened in the days that followed his terrible demise. So this morning I stand here telling you stories, possibly of stories, vague memories of my father watching television, Walter Cronkite's image on the evening news, and one thing really distinctly, the way his voice sounded when he yelled the news from the TV room to my mother in the kitchen. I remember her coming quickly into the room, wiping her hands on the dish towel she was holding, and sitting down next to us, a little bit worried she might have sat on me and scooching over. Fred's what's happened, Fred? Wait, Rhett. Lorette, just wait. My mom's name is Loretta. Lorette, Cronkite says they done killed Dr. King. Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Mississippi, Tennessee. Later that night, after the TV had been moved to the front room, which was a bigger room, and our house was full of my parents' friends, and the glow of burning buildings and burning offices and burning streets was alive on the screen and reflected in their faces. Later that night, I remember sneaking into the front room. I remember knowing something important was happening. I remember watching the adults and thinking, I'm not supposed to be here right now. And I wasn't. Shortly thereafter, my mom shooed me from the room and took me upstairs and tucked me in. I remember the TV stayed on all night. That is what I remember. Mostly remember. Like I said, that story has been told and retold so many times, I'm not sure exactly which parts of it are mine and which parts of it belong to my dad. So those are things I might remember. These are things I know. I know that Dr. King was called by his people and the events of the civil rights movement to the life of an activist preacher. The key word in that sentence is called an activist. He wanted to be a preacher. He wanted a small church. He wanted to do pastoral care. He wanted to do what every seminarian thinks about, is have a flock that he took care of. Activism didn't come until later. But he responded. He responded to the events of the time because of a deep faith in God and a true belief in the humanity of man. He changed the movement. That single person changed the narrative of this country forever. He was brave. He was heroic. He was a man that made history. I know standing here today that his life is not only worthy of reflection and remembrance, it is to be revered. There are not very many living examples of love and compassion in action, and that is exactly what Dr. King was. His life is worthy of much more, though, than a parade and a day off from work and a celebration on a single Monday in the coldest month of the year. I know that in the years preceding and following King's death, civil rights and the fate of people of color, particularly people of my color, was on the political and the social front page. Marching, singing, sit-ins, peaceful and violent protests were happening. There was this feeling in the air of change, and he was at the head of it. There was this feeling that we were going to make that dream come true, and he kept spinning dreams for us and was right there with us. There were rallying cries for change and a deep, nearly guttural need amongst thousands and thousands of people to end this century-long struggle for racial equality. I was 6 when he died. But I still know, and I don't think this is a memory, I know my parents were concerned about justice. I know they talked about reconciliation when he was in that front room watching TV, yelling back to her in the kitchen. I know they had friends who fought to topple the walls of oppression and hatred, of division and denial, and of sanctioned institutional indifference. I know they were regular people, just like you and me, who dreamed the dream along with King. And when he was killed, and the cities were burned, and the TVs played all night long, they were not just enraged, they were brokenhearted. That was then. This is now. And I stand here now this morning a bit brokenhearted, but also worried. I've begun to ask myself, as I got ready for this sermon and as I thought about the memories versus reality, I started asking myself, was it all a dream? And that's when I worried even more. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe what happened is we declared victory. People decided to pack up their banners and signs and loudspeakers and go home. The dream had come true. Maybe I'm worried because that kind of apathy has settled in our lives and our hearts and truly taken root. Maybe I'm worried because the minimum wage that doesn't allow a family of 4 to buy fresh vegetables and pay for health insurance is a reality in the state of Oklahoma. Maybe I'm worried that we're just too tired to fight anymore, that we're too tired for banners and marching and walking in the streets. The dream may not still be alive. The lessons we learned from Dr. King and from John F. Kennedy and from John's brother Robert seem to have taken on a burnished patina of history. The belief that we still need to struggle for racial, gender, or sexual equity possibly has gone a little soft. I know we just made history this week in Oklahoma in the idea that soon same-sex couples will be able to be married, and that gave me heart. But I still stand here thinking the walls have not completely tumbled down. Our work is not done, and I am worried. The hard truth is we remain a divided populace. Our communities are fractured in ways that many people, and let's be honest, many people, well-meaning people, don't know what to do to stop the fracturing. Half of the people sitting in the sanctuary this morning have never been followed around a store by a suspicious shopkeeper, or been denied a home loan, or caught in the sharp glare of a car dealer's lying smile, or been pulled over by a police officer and forced to stand spread eagle on the side of the road for no apparent reason. Half of the people in this sanctuary this morning have not been CBB, caught being black, because their car was too new or too clean or in the wrong area of town. There are some people who still have a difficult time understanding what it is like to be in that place pre-dream, what it is like to be in the place post-dream when the dream has not completely come true. Sometimes they cannot put their footprints into the footprints of those who stood on the side of the road with their hands on the roof of a car. Sometimes they don't grasp exactly how much more work there is to be done. So yeah, I'm worried. But there's a piece of me. There's a little piece of me that stays lit with joy. So while I'm worried, and I gave you a whole bunch of things to be worried about this morning too, I am a believer. I do think that we can change the world. I have a deep, abiding faith in humanity, and I drink daily from the fountain of the beloved community and am refreshed by the powers of its love. I am heartened when I read stories like that of UU minister and social justice activist Richard Weston Jones. That bears repeating because his name is important. Richard Weston Jones. A retired minister, a PK, the son of another minister. He served congregations in California and Pennsylvania and North Carolina. He was arrested when he participated with Dr. King in 1964 during the demonstrations in southern Alabama. What's interesting about his story is while he was arrested, he could have left jail and chose not to. The protests in Selma went on for over a week. He was arrested and, inspired by King's call, along with the brown men around him, stayed in a small cell for over 10 days. There was a point when police officers came through and offered him release. He chose to stay. The protesters were held for hours and hours at machine gun point. They were held for even longer in a parking lot in the blazing Alabama sun. New groups of arrestees joined them until they numbered nearly 350, black and white, standing in the boiling sun together. Eventually, they were marched into a community center, and then they were marched to jail. And then the white folks were told they could leave, and Richard didn't. The next morning, after a night on cold concrete floors, they all walked in total silence back through the white section of Selma to the homes of their black host. Weston Jones stood in front of the group and said, "Martin inspired us, transforming us into a community of righteousness overnight. He empowered us to conduct ourselves with peace, with resolution, with love in the face of danger. We believe in Weston's dream." I stand here ready to keep the dream alive. The spirit of Dr. King is present to us in a very direct way. We recognize more keenly how prophetic his message was. We see that the vision he laid out for us in the cadence of scripture, in the love of language, was not about division, but was about healing. We see a happy preacher, a man made of steel, most importantly, a man. Weston and his mentor King were not just dreaming when they marched. They were dreaming because there was something they wanted to come true. They were dreaming because attack dogs and fire hoses and narrow jail cells are not the norm. They were dreaming because death had bound us to cause, because both white and black shook America to its core and forced us to confront terrible truths and look at racial injustice from the inside out for the first time. We've come a long way, but we're not done. That's the burning kernel for me, is that we've come a long way, but we know we're not done. Schools are desegregated. Entertainers and sports figures of all colors are superstars and multimillionaires. African Americans head multinational corporations, run police departments, school districts, city governments, army divisions. And yes, we have a brown person in the White House, elected not once, but twice. The dream has not been destroyed, but the challenge for all of us is to embrace the dream and move it into action. It is a time for greatness. It is a time to find your idealism. It is a time not just for compassionate words, but for compassionate action. I stand here because other African American ministers have stood in pulpits before me. I am a direct result of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in so many ways. What I'm asking you is to hold the dream strong, is to continue the path, is to make sure other ministers like me stand in other UU pulpits across this country. That's aiming for greatness. That's embracing idealism and making it real. That is compassionate action. Politics, religion, race, all of them will come together over and over. The best place for them to come together is church, because church is not just a place where good friends gather to support one another. The Holy Spirit is not here on the side of stability. Jesus doesn't tell us, I've come for you to be comfortable. He said, I've come that you might have life. Church is the place where demands of justice have to be taken seriously. It's a place where we trouble the waters and we're refreshed. It's where we get respite. It's where we look controversy in the eye and answer hard questions. I think this church is the place that will keep the dream alive. So while I worry, I stand firm knowing that Dr. King would tell me to move beyond fear, to open my heart to the inherent worth and dignity of each single person in this room, to go on fighting bigotry, administrations, and racist institutions. I think what Dr. King would say is find the love. It might be difficult, Carol. It might not hang with you every single moment of every single day. But the dream is here. The love remains. Have faith in the possibility that you can transform even the most tightly closed system and crack it open so all will belong equally. I think Dr. King would smile. I'm going to close with a very, very short reading for you all this morning. And actually, it's more of a song. Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain. We all have sorrow. But if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. The dream's alive today and tomorrow.